The humid night air of Panama felt heavier than usual, the kind of weight you can explain with just temperature or moisture, a suffocating presence that seemed to crawl into the lungs of anyone who dared step outside. Whispers of something unnatural drifted through small neighborhoods, carried from house to house like smoke from a fire no one wanted to acknowledge. It all began when a man known only as Kin resurfaced online with an update that froze even the most skeptical of viewers in place. His voice trembled, but not from uncertainty. No, this was the voice of someone who knew too much. He spoke of an alien entity, something not of this world, lingering in the shadows of Panama's dense jungles and narrow city streets. But what unsettled listeners most wasn't the alien itself. It was what had just happened to Kin. They just swatted him, he whispered. Those words would echo far beyond the digital space where he released them. They were not casual words. They carried the weight of terror. The suggestion that authorities, or forces even greater, had deliberately silenced a man who came too close to exposing something the world wasn't supposed to know. At first, the community assumed it was nothing more than a cruel prank or an exaggerated internet tale. But as fragments of information leaked from Panama, reports of black SUVs lurking near certain neighborhoods, sudden disappearances, and locals describing strange figures seen along remote jungle trails, the fear crystallized into something undeniable. Kin's update wasn't fiction. It was a warning. And the swatting wasn't just harassment. To those listening closely, it meant something far darker: the systematic removal of anyone who dared to look the alien in the eye. For decades, Panama had been whispered about among conspiracy theorists as more than just a narrow strip of land connecting to oceans. Beneath its tropical canopy, countless legends circulated. Soldiers stumbling upon ancient ruins not marked on any map, locals swearing they'd encountered pale-skinned beings at night, and fishermen who vanished after claiming they saw something crawl out of the sea. But never before had such stories been punctuated by such an immediate and chilling event. The alien entity Kin spoke of wasn't just a figure of folklore. Witnesses described it as tall, thin, and disturbingly fast, a creature with skin that shimmered faintly under moonlight, as if reflecting light in unnatural patterns. Its eyes glowed, not with fire, but with an almost mechanical intelligence, scanning, calculating, and most disturbing of all, it didn't seem to fear humans. In fact, it seemed to study them. The night after Kin's chilling update, a small group of residents gathered quietly in a dimly lit bar in the outskirts of Panama City. The fans overhead spun lazily, failing to break the heat. No one spoke above a whisper. They were there to exchange stories, each one more unnerving than the last. One man claimed he'd seen the creature crouching at the edge of his farm, its elongated fingers pressed into the soil, as though it were testing the earth itself. Another swore he had heard strange clicking sounds outside his window at night, only to look out and see a pair of reflective eyes vanish into the darkness. But the most disturbing testimony came from a young woman who said she had followed the authorities after the swatting incident. She claimed she saw government agents carrying large metallic cases, their faces pale with fear rather than authority. Inside those cases, she said, something moved, something alive. Panama had suddenly become the center of a storm. Online forums buzzed with speculation. Some believed Kin had stumbled upon a secret alien-human program, an experiment gone wrong, now leaking into the public eye. Others argued it was a new species entirely, something unearthed by deforestation or construction deep in the rainforest. Yet, the one thing no one could ignore was this. Every time someone spoke too loudly about the alien entity, they vanished. Kin's update wasn't just a news drop, it was a countdown, a ticking clock warning others that if you dig too deeply you will meet the same fate. From this moment forward, the question was no longer if the alien existed. The question was, how far would those in power go to ensure we never truly saw it? The entity wasn't alone. Locals whispered of multiple sightings across provinces, as if several of these beings had emerged simultaneously. And each sighting followed the same chilling pattern: unexplained power outages, sudden silence in the jungle where wildlife usually screamed and chirped, and finally, the sound of something moving in places no human could move. The cover-up was just as disturbing as the entity itself. Social media accounts discussing the event were deleted. Video uploads glitched or vanished overnight. Even international news agencies, which briefly picked up the story, dropped it without explanation, leaving only vague security statements in their wake. For Kin's followers, one phrase lingered louder than all the rest: they just swatted him. It wasn't just Kin's fate. It was a blueprint for what would happen next to anyone who dared to get close. The night after Kin's update spread across the internet, a quiet unease settled over Panama. Streets that were once filled with late-night chatter and music suddenly fell silent after dusk. Locals locked their doors earlier, whispered in hushed tones, and avoided looking into the trees when they walked home, because now, everyone knew there was something out there. The whispers in the jungle. In a small rural village near the Gap, a fisherman named sat by the riverbank with his lantern dimmed low. He told anyone who would listen that he had seen the alien. Not just a fleeting glimpse, but long enough to burn the sight into his mind. His account was chilling. It was crouched on the other side of the river. At first I thought it was a man, thin and sickly, with skin too pale to belong in this heat. But then, it stood, taller than any man. Its head tilted, like it was studying me, like it already knew everything about me. Its eyes glowed, not red, not yellow, but something I can't describe. Like light reflecting off water, except it came from inside. When threw a rock into the river, out of instinct, the creature didn't flinch. Instead, it raised one hand and slowly spread its fingers wide. The water rippled unnaturally, waves bending toward as though pulled by an invisible hand. That was when he ran. By the time he reached the safety of the village, his legs shook so badly he could barely stand. But what terrified him most wasn't the encounter. It was the realization that the creature had chased him. It had let him go, as if it wanted the story to spread. The authorities move in. The morning after a sighting, black vehicles rolled into the area. They bore no insignia, no license plates. Men in tactical gear stepped out, scanning the jungle with strange handheld devices that clicked and hummed. They spoke no Spanish, only terse English. Villagers who tried to approach them were warned to leave immediately. By the afternoon, makeshift checkpoints were established on the dirt roads leading in and out of the village. Drones buzzed overhead, and for the first time in living memory, helicopters circled above the thick rainforest canopy. It wasn't a response to hysteria. It was a hunt. But if they were there to capture the alien, why did the soldiers themselves look so afraid? One young villager, Mateo, swore he saw a soldier break formation at night, screaming into the trees before vanishing in a flash of light. No gunfire, no struggle, just gone. The others stayed silent, but their hands trembled when they gripped their weapons. The videos that shouldn't exist despite the crackdown, grainy cell phone footage began leaking online. One video, posted briefly before being scrubbed, showed a shaky camera view of a glowing silhouette standing between the trees. It looked humanoid, but its movements were wrong. Too fluid, too precise, like a marionette being pulled by invisible strings. Another video, uploaded from a rooftop in Panama City, showed streaks of light darting across the sky at unnatural speeds. At first, viewers thought it was drones, but then the light stopped mid-air, hovered, and shot off in different directions without acceleration, vanishing into the clouds. The comment sections were filled with two types of people, those who were terrified and those who insisted these were staged hoaxes. But for every skeptic, another account would appear claiming they had seen the same thing with their own eyes. The pattern became clear. Every real piece of footage was deleted within hours. The only ones that survived were blurry copies, re-uploaded by anonymous users who seemed to know they were being hunted too. And then, more chilling still, some of these anonymous posters disappeared. Their accounts went dead. Their voices were silenced. The locals speak. Beyond the digital war, the stories on the ground grew darker. In a jungle clearing, an abandoned farmhouse stood with its roof collapsed. It had once belonged to a family of 4. Their neighbors reported that one night, strange humming filled the air. Not like a machine, but like an insect song magnified 100 times over. By morning, the family was gone. Their belongings were still there. The food on the table was untouched, but the walls bore marks. Long, vertical scratches. As though something with inhuman hands had traced along the wooden beams, and on the floor, etched into the dirt, were shapes. Not letters, not numbers, symbols no one recognized. Authorities sealed the farmhouse within hours, but the villagers who had seen the symbols whispered that they weren't random. They were a message. Kin's warning comes alive. While the world debated, those who had followed Kin from the beginning realized something horrifying. Everything he warned about was coming true. He had said the alien was studying us. Now people were reporting behaviors that backed this up. Creatures appearing in the same spots repeatedly, watching the same families, even mimicking human gestures. One child swore the entity he saw raised its hand the same way his father did when calling him home for dinner. Another described the alien tilting its head at the same angle as his teacher, as though it had been observing people closely enough to mimic them. The idea wasn't just that the alien was present, it was learning, and the swatting of Kin. It suddenly felt less like a punishment and more like a desperate attempt to prevent humanity from realizing the truth. These beings weren't just visitors, they were infiltrators. The fear spreads. By the third week, Panama's atmosphere was suffocating. Rumors spread faster than truth. Some said the government had already captured one of the creatures. Others whispered that the military wasn't trying to capture anything. They were trying to contain it, to stop it from spreading. But how do you contain something that can walk through walls of jungle and vanish into thin air? The people knew the answer. You can't. The fear wasn't just of the alien anymore. It was of their own government, their own protectors. Soldiers raided homes under the pretense of safety checks. Locals who spoke too loudly about what they had seen were taken away for questioning and never came back. And still, the sightings continued. The alien wasn't hiding anymore, it was everywhere. The entity reveals its power. The final straw came when an entire village's power grid shut down one night without warning. Generators fried, phones died, lanterns wouldn't light, even matches refused to spark. The villagers huddled together in the dark, listening. At first it was just the sound of the jungle. Then came the clicking, soft, deliberate, echoing through the trees. It grew louder, surrounding them from every direction, and then silence. When the power returned at dawn, several people were gone. No footprints, no struggle, just gone. The survivors swore they had seen tall, glowing figures moving between the trees and the darkness, their eyes reflecting light that wasn't there. The message was clear. The alien entity was no longer content to watch. It was acting. The story of the Panama alien should have ended with silence. After Kin was swatted, many expected the narrative to collapse into the void. His accounts deleted, his voice erased, his story buried under 1,000 louder distractions. That was the plan. To shut him down, to make sure the alien entity was forgotten. But what happened next ensured the opposite. Because when they silenced Kin, they did not silence the truth. They amplified it. The footage that wouldn't die within hours of Kin swatting, backup files of his recordings began appearing across obscure channels, encrypted drives, and private forums. It was as though a ghost army of archivists had been waiting for this moment, ensuring the footage would live on no matter how aggressively it was scrubbed. Some claimed Kin himself had arranged for these digital dead drops caches of unreleased video and notes, hidden until the day he was silenced. Others argued it was his followers, desperate to keep his work alive. But however it happened, the footage spread again. And this time, what people saw was far worse than before. One clip showed Kin whispering into the camera. If you're watching this, they know. They're not trying to study it anymore. They're trying to contain it. But you can't contain what isn't bound by our rules. Behind him, the water rippled unnaturally, though no wind stirred the surface. For a brief moment, something dark rose, a shape like a hand, too elongated, too fluid, reaching upward before vanishing again. Another clip, less than 20 seconds long, showed Kin's flashlight beam cutting through jungle foliage. At first, it looked like nothing, but in the corner of the frame, two glowing points hovered in the darkness. Not reflections, not eyes in the animal sense, but something more deliberate. They blinked, not together, but independently. When Kin lowered the camera, the lights moved, slowly, toward him. The video cut off. Panama locks down. By the time these videos circulated, Panama was no longer free ground. Checkpoints dotted the highways. News crews were turned away at gunpoint. Even locals were being stopped, interrogated, and in some cases detained without explanation. The official statement was vague. Environmental hazard, unidentified contamination, safety concerns. But no one believed those words anymore. Everyone knew what this was really about. The alien wasn't just a secret anymore. It was a contagion of fear. Entire regions near the Gap became ghost towns overnight. Businesses closed, schools shut down. Even border crossings grew eerily quiet. Soldiers patrolled the outskirts of villages, but the people inside no longer trusted them. In whispered conversations, the villagers said the soldiers weren't there to protect them, they were bait. And then came the disappearances, the vanishing. At first it was just individuals. A farmer walking home alone at dusk, his lantern found extinguished on the dirt road, but no body. A group of children who swore they saw a man made of shadows standing in their backyard before their dog went missing. But soon the vanishings grew bolder. A fishing boat with 6 men aboard was found drifting empty down the river, its engine still humming, nets cast wide. No struggle, no blood, just silence. One night, a school on the outskirts of Panama City was evacuated, after reports of humming lights above the roof. When authorities arrived, they found the building abandoned. Teachers, students, everyone gone. Only their belongings remained. The official report called it mass hysteria, but the parents who returned to empty classrooms knew better. Something had taken them. The signs in the sky and then the skies themselves betrayed Panama. Every night, strange lights darted above the jungle, sometimes streaking like meteors, sometimes hovering motionless for hours. Witnesses described triangular formations, glowing orbs, and beams of light descending into the forest canopy. Air traffic control claimed these were drones or atmospheric disturbances, but the pilots who flew over the region whispered otherwise. One commercial pilot swore he saw a massive translucent structure hovering above the tree line, invisible to radar, but undeniable to the human eye. It shimmered like heat distortion, bending starlight behind it. And when his plane approached, the structure simply folded away, vanishing into thin air, as if the sky itself had been rewritten. The multiplication, the most terrifying realization, came slowly, in fragments pieced together by those still brave enough to document. The alien entity Kin had discovered was not alone. At first, people assumed each new sighting was of the same being, moving across the region, but the timelines didn't match. Multiple sightings occurred simultaneously, separated by hundreds of kilometers. In one village, a man reported a figure with glowing veins crossing a field at midnight. At the same hour, a woman in Panama City swore she saw the same figure peering into her apartment window on the 10th floor. And when survivors described their encounters, the details differed. One entity had elongated limbs like dripping ink. Another looked almost solid, with a humanoid frame and eyes like burning coals. Yet another was seen slithering across a riverbank, its body more liquid than flesh. The truth became undeniable. The meteorite had not carried a single alien life form, it had carried a colony, and they were spreading. The blackout, the more reports surfaced, the tighter the blackout became. Journalists were arrested. Independent bloggers vanished. International media briefly mentioned unrest in Panama, before dropping the subject entirely. On the ground, locals whispered that even speaking aloud about the entities was dangerous, not because of soldiers, but because the aliens themselves seemed to hear. The fisherman who had first reported seeing the creature by the river was one of the first to realize it. After giving an interview to a local YouTuber, he woke that night to find his walls vibrating with a low hum. His lanterns went out, and outside his window, glowing shapes drifted like jellyfish through the darkness. By dawn, was gone. His house stood untouched. The YouTuber who uploaded his interview was arrested within hours. The message was clear: speak, and they will come. The last broadcast, but one final piece of footage slipped through. A shaky livestream filmed from a phone, lasting only 3 minutes before it was cut off. The stream showed a young man in tears, whispering frantically, "They're here, not one, not two, there are dozens. They're moving like shadows in the trees. They're watching every house. We're not supposed to talk, but I need someone to know. I need someone to..." The feed erupted in static. Behind him, a glowing silhouette appeared at the window. The phone fell. The stream ended. That video spread faster than any before it. Millions watched before it was deleted. But by then, the damage was done. The world had seen, and the world could no longer deny that Panama was under siege. The world thought the Panama story was a local mystery, viral oddity, a strange alien rumor that would die out as quickly as it began. But what unfolded in the weeks after Kin's disappearance proved otherwise. Panama was not a story anymore. It was ground zero. The silence before the storm. For a brief time, it seemed the blackout had worked. News channels no longer mentioned Panama. Social media platforms removed videos, posts, and even entire accounts discussing the entity. Search engines redirected inquiries to vague government-issued safety advisories. To the outside world, it was as though Panama had fallen off the map, but those who lived there knew otherwise. Every night, the jungle hummed. It wasn't the sound of insects or wind through the leaves. It was deeper, a low, resonant vibration that carried through the soil, the rivers, even the walls of homes. Those who heard it too long reported headaches, hallucinations, and eventually, nosebleeds. And then the lights came back, not the flickering orbs seen before. These were massive beams that descended from the sky like searchlights, illuminating vast swaths of jungle as though something above was scanning the land for life. Children screamed that the sky was peeling. Elders whispered the ancient stories of beings who once came from the stars to harvest souls. And in the quiet moments, whole villages packed their belongings and fled. By then, even the soldiers were deserting. The jungle war, it started in whispers. A firefight in the forest. An entire platoon of soldiers sent into the restricted zone had vanished without contact. Their radios only transmitted static, punctuated by a strange clicking sound like an insect imitating human speech. When reinforcements arrived days later, they found no bodies, only equipment. Weapons bent in impossible ways, metal twisted into spirals. Helmets crushed inward as if by a giant's fist. Some of the trees themselves had black stains across their trunks, as though something corrosive had melted into the bark. And then came the footage, leaked by an unknown source. A night vision video showed soldiers firing into the jungle. Their rounds sparked against invisible shapes, something tall and half-seen moving unnaturally fast. One soldier screamed, and his body was lifted into the air, tentacles coiling around him before pulling him into the canopy. His rifle clattered to the ground. The video ended with the camera itself being yanked away, and a blur of liquid black slamming into the lens. It was undeniable. Panama was at war, not against a human enemy, but against something born of the stars. The collapse of control. International whispers grew louder. U.S. officials denied involvement. Those satellites had been repositioned to watch the gap every night. Russian and Chinese surveillance drones were spotted in the skies above Panama. And in underground forums, alleged insiders leaked fragments of documents that spoke of multiple entities, regenerative biology, and hive-level intelligence. But while governments postured and speculated, Panama itself crumbled. Roads into the restricted zone were blocked by burning barricades. Refugees poured into cities, carrying stories of entire families taken in the night. Hospitals filled with patients suffering burns, paralysis, and in some cases, rapid cellular decay. Doctors whispered of victims whose blood had turned black, their veins crawling with something not fully human. In desperation, locals turned to their churches. Priests and shamans alike performed exorcisms in the streets, waving crosses and chanting prayers to banish the invaders. But still, the lights in the jungle pulsed stronger every night. It was as though the land itself was being rewritten. Kin's final transmission, and then, without warning, Kin's voice returned. Late one night, thousands of people across the world received a mysterious push notification. A live stream. The account had no name, just a blank profile picture. But when viewers joined, they froze in disbelief. It was him, Kin, bruised, thinner than before, his eyes bloodshot from lack of sleep, but unmistakably alive. His voice shook as he spoke. I don't have long, they know I'm doing this. But you need to understand, it wasn't just one. The meteorite was a seed, a spore, and it's hatching. Everything you've seen is just the beginning. He pointed the camera around. Behind him was not a jungle, but a ruined building, walls crumbling, windows shattered, and in the center of the room, a tank. Inside, the entity writhed, larger now. Its tentacles pressed against the glass, leaving trails of black slime. Its body shimmered between forms, sometimes liquid, sometimes solid, sometimes a horrifying imitation of human features that melted as quickly as they appeared. Kin whispered again, almost in tears. It learns. Every time you look at it, it learns. And now it's not just in Panama, it's spreading the others. They're already here. Before he could say more, a deafening bang shook the room. Armed men stormed in, shouting. Kin dropped the phone. The live stream cut to static. And just like that, he was gone. But millions had already seen. Millions had heard. And millions believed. The Panama quarantined. The very next day, Panama's government declared martial law. The entire gap was sealed off, marked as a permanent quarantine zone. Aircraft were forbidden from flying overhead. Anyone caught crossing the perimeter faced immediate arrest or worse. Rumors swirled that the jungle itself was being firebombed. Locals reported hearing thunderous explosions at night, followed by pillars of smoke rising from the trees. But those who lived nearest the quarantine line said something chilling. The bombs didn't matter, because every time fire consumed the forest, the lights returned brighter than before. The entities were not being destroyed. They were adapting. The global reaction within weeks. Whispers of similar sightings spread far beyond Panama. Strange figures spotted in the deserts of Chile. A glowing humanoid walking through a flooded street in Indonesia. Entire flocks of birds falling dead from the sky in Canada, their bodies covered in the same black slime first seen in Panama. Governments scrambled to contain the panic. Social media platforms purged millions of posts. News anchors ridiculed the stories as conspiracy theories. But in private, world leaders convened emergency sessions. Satellite data leaked online suggested the presence of multiple impact sites around the globe. Panama, it seemed, had not been the only place where something fell from the heavens. It had just been the first to break open. The final night, and then came the night that changed everything. Residents of Panama City were woken by a deep, unearthly hum. Buildings shook, windows shattered, and above the skyline a massive rift of light tore open the sky. Witnesses swore they saw shapes descending, hundreds of them, drifting like shadows with glowing cores. Some were the size of men. Others, the size of buildings. They poured into the city like a flood. Gunfire echoed through the streets. Sirens wailed. The military deployed tanks and helicopters. But nothing seemed to stop the invaders. They moved like liquid, flowing around bullets, bending steel, absorbing fire. By dawn, the city was in ruins. Entire districts had fallen silent. The survivors who managed to flee described the same horrific sight. The entities were no longer hiding. They were claiming the revelation. 2 days later, a leaked document surfaced online. Dated months before Kin's first video, it revealed something unthinkable. The meteorite that landed in Panama had been tracked long before impact. Governments already knew it was not a natural object. They had debated intercepting it, but chose to wait, to observe, to see what would emerge. They knew, they had always known, and Kin had simply been the first to stumble upon the truth they tried to bury. Outro: the warning today, the story of the Panama entity remains shrouded in disinformation. Officially, nothing happened. Panama was struck by unrest, by natural disasters, by anything except the truth. But those who were there remember the hum in the ground, the lights in the sky, the whispers that made their way into every home, every mind, every dream, and they know this is not the end. Because Panama was only the beginning. And the question is no longer if they're here, it's how long until they find you. OUTRO for narration. Thank you for watching Mysteries Within. What do you think really happened in Panama? Was Kin silenced because he exposed the truth? Or is this only the first chapter of something far bigger, something that stretches far beyond one country? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories that uncover the hidden truths lurking in our world.